You know, there are so many legs to this story, if you will. I mean, the concerns over China go beyond trade. You know, they go to the fact that China is growing a lot faster than the U.S., almost 7% growth expected this year. The fact that China has 1.3 billion people versus under 400 million in the United States. And the fact that as China gains economically, they are applying those gains economically to their military base. Listen to what House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mac Thornberry told me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures, and also what former Vice President Dick Cheney said about the biggest threat the U.S. faces today. Here's two sound bites for you, sir.
China doesn't just take an all-of-government approach, they take an all-of-nation approach. Any company, any individual will be a tool of the Chinese government to steal, to buy, to borrow, whatever it takes, intellectual property that can be used in their military against us.
I think the Chinese long-term are the most serious, have the most capability, and have made some phenomenal gains economically, which they're now converting to better military capability and so forth.
Your take, Secretary Ross, on the strength of China and how it's changed in the last couple of years.
Well, China has clearly gotten stronger. They're pulling their economy together. They're moving up the intellectual value-added ladder in terms of manufacturing. They're a coming force and coming very rapidly and very determinedly. But that isn't going to be solved just by these trade talks. That gets into all kinds of geopolitical issues. But on our talks, we are not minimizing the importance of technology by a long shot. In fact, in June, the Department of Patents will be issuing its 10 millionth patent. No country in the whole world has ever remotely approached that. That's an enormously important indicator of how valuable inventiveness and technology is to our economy.
It sure is.
There's nobody in our camp that has any intention of not dealing with those problems.
Yeah, and you know, this is the kind of issue, Secretary, that most Americans get. They understand that China has been stealing intellectual property from the United States for years. In fact, the estimated cost of the loss of that IP is above $300 billion it costs the U.S. because of that theft. So let me ask you this. One of the few leverage points that I think that this president, this administration, you and your colleagues have had is this idea of national security. The pushback, the 301, if you will, in the U.S. Trade Act to push back on China to say you can't do this or that or have these practices because this is a national security issue. But I understand China would like that 301 national security issue off the table. Is the president going to give in to that?
Well, what we have agreed to is to continue the discussions, see if we can get to a definitive agreement that really makes some sense. As I mentioned, I'll be going over there next week. There'll be other people working on other parts of it. Either we'll make a final arrangement or we won't. But the 301 action, just like the 232s, has not gone away. The 301 is still there. It's getting ready to be used. And if need be, it will be used.
Do you support a plan to relax the Tiananmen Square sanctions?
Tiananmen Square sanctions, I think you must be referring to something other than Tiananmen Square.
In terms of sanctions, relaxing sanctions against China, is that part of the discussion as well, Mr. Secretary?
At this moment, that is not something we've been really discussing.
Okay, so just to be clear, the country, China, has not agreed to buying $200 billion of more stuff, and the U.S. is not agreeing to put off tariffs until a formal agreement is reached. You're still in negotiation then?
There is negotiation, but we have agreed on a framework. Now the effort is to translate that framework into an executable reality. That's what we really have agreed. The 301 is a cocked pistol It's ready to be fired whenever it needs to be fired.
I see. Secretary Ross, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for clearing it up.